And now I do know that you've also trained with like the inventor of Taekwondo, General Choi. What was that like?
Yes, so basically what happened was in 1988, my instructor retired and turned the school over to myself as his highest ranking student and some of the other people. And at that point, I really didn't have an instructor, so I decided, since I was teaching General Choi system, and very often you would hear different people say, no, do it this way, do it that way, do it the other way. I said, to heck with this, I'm going to go to the founder of the system, and there was an instructor course being held in 1990 in Colorado. So I got my butt on an airplane and went to the instructor course with General Choi. And the interesting thing about that course was, although I had some of the highest ranking instructors in the country, and at that time, people, it's hard for them to appreciate there weren't a lot of books. There certainly weren't easily available videotapes, obviously, no
Yeah.
internet. So as he would be saying things during the course, I would have, and by that time we did have a book, a little voice inside my brain would be saying stuff like, that's not right. But then I'm thinking, well, it has to be right because he's the founder unless he changed something. And then I would go back to the book and you could see, like the old telephone game, how you have a line of people, one person tells the next person a story, they
Oh,
repeat
yeah.
this, how it would get changed over time. So I had over 150, and I was thinking, I'm not going to learn much. I've been doing this for 15 years. I'm a fourth degree black belt. I had over 150 things I wrote down because I took notes. Previous seminar I've been to, the instructor says, you don't take notes, you're going to remember like three or four things. So I had these 150 things I wrote down that I needed to fix in order to be able to teach the system how the creator of the system wanted it taught.
Okay. So it was obviously completely different from like what you had learned like previously.
Well, I don't know that it was completely different, but you could see how what he wanted, varied somewhat from the way people were doing things. And again, the further removed some people were from his teaching, the further removed that the way they were doing things. The other big issue was that when he started Taekwondo, he, instead of taking a bunch of beginners and teaching them, he recruited some of the top martial arts talent in the country. In fact, are you familiar with how the origins of Taekwondo, how it started?
Yeah, I'm familiar with the origins there.
I mean, about how there was a demonstration before the Taekwondo started in 19, it didn't exist till 1955.
Okay.
And in 1954, before Taekwondo existed, there was a military demonstration in front of the president of South Korea, Syngman Rhee. And you had all these people in green army fatigues and, tanks and artillery and all this stuff. You had 2 dozen guys in white uniforms doing martial arts. And President Rhee knew General Choi, who was on the podium with him, had a martial arts background from Japan. And he said to General Choi, we have to teach this stuff to the troops. And there were 28 infantry divisions, and he let General Choi create the 29th division. And then General Choi recruited the top martial arts talent in the country into this division and then developed them to learn his system and teach his system. And he also traveled throughout the world getting various instructors in the USA, Korean instructors, to not use the old system but adopt his new system. Well, they did that as best they could, but they didn't change their habits that they had developed over so many years. So where they had these habits that they developed from their roots, they passed a lot of them along to their progeny who thought, oh, I'm learning from one of the pioneers. I must be doing this right. And never really had any exposure that there was other stuff out there a little bit different than the way they were doing things.
Okay, that's actually kind of interesting. So do you remember like any like examples of like anything in specific that it was kind of like different that you like taught?
Yes, there were several things because you could see, one of the biggest, the schools, the various independent schools in Korea at the time were called kwans. And one of the biggest ones at the time was called the Chungdo Kwan. So naturally, a lot of the pioneers that he recruited were from the Chungdo Kwan. So, if, for instance, I asked him once at a seminar, I said, sir, I says, your rising outer forearm block, you start with the blocking arm on top. And a lot of
Yeah.
systems, they start with it from underneath. I said, why did you choose to do it the way you do it as opposed to the way they did it? And he explained that it was fairly simple. Said, because if you block with for his system, if you block with the pinky side of the arm, the outer forearm, you start with that on top. If you're doing blocks with, basically it had nothing to do with anything specific other than having consistency in the system. Another thing that he taught differently was for the low outer forearm block, which is very common in a lot of systems. Those people, and the way I originally learned it, you would finish with your fist over your thigh or over your knee. And he was like, no, you keep the thumb side of the fist even with the center line because I want that arm to continue to be in a position to protect your body as opposed to leaving your body open. So that was another major difference. A lot of people had very deep, because it was a Japanese system, their walking stances were very long and very deep. Because one of the founders of karate, Gichin Funakoshi, he had this whole big, be deeply rooted idea of your stances. But when you have your stance that long and that deep, one of the systems he would use, or examples General Choi would use was, okay, now do a lead leg front snap kick. And if your stance is very long and very deep, it really is difficult to shift your weight back in order to kick with your lead foot. So
Yeah.
the interesting thing about all these little things, and a lot of them are little things, was he had a reason for what he did. Now, people are free to disagree with his reasons for whatever things, but unlike a lot of the foreign pioneers, they never tell you a reason. They say, do this, just do this, like this. That was
Yeah.
the reason, if you could even ask a question.
Yeah. That's true. I remember Jake actually mentioning like how General Choi was not like in favor of like the sparring.
Well, he liked to think more of along the lines of one technique for victory or one punch, to finish or one kick to finish. So the sparring, developed as a sport and controlled contract and really lost a lot of that aspect. Plus, then you had the advent of the safety gear, which was
Yeah.
different and those types of things. And he liked to be able to try and emphasize effective blocking, but in the blocking, not just to stop from being hit, but the blocking to actually damage the limb of the person trying to attack you. And all of that gets lost in the sparring portion of the competition, so to speak.
Okay, okay, that's right. Now, you mentioned some books of General Choi. Do you have any like personal recommendations?
Well, from a technical standpoint, the epitome of his work is a 15-volume encyclopedia.
Okay.
And so he'll have, let's say, volume 3 is just hand techniques. Volume 4 is just leg techniques. And then he'll have the pattern volumes. One volume takes 3 patterns. So he'll actually, patterns are the technical, cultural, aesthetic, artistic part of Taekwondo. So they're very specific. And it'll have, like, for each new move, it'll have what the application of that move is, how you use it. It'll have pictures from various perspectives. And along with that encyclopedia, now there's videos. The videos, a lot of them are available online. They're the ones, if you find a pattern volume with a black background, that's typically the ones he oversaw to go along with the encyclopedia. But it's missing the original aspect of the video, which was, I haven't really seen it again, and I don't even know if you could, I think it was like Windows 95 it was made for, or Windows 3.11, where if you were watching the video, you could click on the top, bottom, right, or left side of the video, and it would automatically flip the perspective to that position. So, like if the person was
Okay.
facing away from you, you couldn't see it. You could click the top of the video, it would automatically flip it, so you could see exactly what that person was doing.
Oh, okay. So okay. So now, now as a person, what was General Choi like?
General Choi was uh, had many different levels to him. You know, Obviously he was a general in the Korean Army, and
Yeah.
when you're a general in the Army and you're in the Army, people have to do what you say.
Yeah.
Well, that's great for developing your martial art or whatever and pulling people in and getting them to accept your system. But for some people who are not in the Army and are doing their own martial art thing, it really pissed them off because they didn't care that he was a general in the Army and they didn't want to do what he said. And one of them, Hong Ki, who was the head of the Mudo clan at the time, he basically, I'm not doing Taekwondo. I'm not following this guy. And then, as time went by and he basically wanted things to be his way, a lot of people became aggravated and there was a huge sense of criticism for him. Now, one of the misplaced criticisms was when he formed this gym for the 29th Infantry Division, he named it the Odo-Kwan. And translated, Odo-Kwan means the gym of my way. And everybody said, and for a long time, they said, see what a control freak he was? He made the gym his way. Everything had to be his way. Now, fast forward some years later, I interviewed a gentleman named Nam Tae-hee. He was one of the people at that military demonstration where they were in front of the president. And I said to him, I says, tell me about the gym of my way. What did that name mean? And he said, well, in those days, everybody was very loyal to their Kwan, the school they came from. And they didn't want to go to a rival Kwan because that would be seen as disloyal. But now they had this new Kwan, which was called the Gym of My Way. So it was each person speaking in the first person, the Gym of My Way or the Gym for all of us. So it was a gym where everybody could belong, which was exactly the opposite of what many of General Choi's critics said. Another issue was that when he found himself on the wrong side of the political fence in Korea, backing the wrong presidential candidate, he became persona non grata. And the powers that be said to him, listen, we're taking control of the ITF. We're taking control of Taekwondo. You can't be in charge of Taekwondo anymore. And supposedly their motivation was to develop instructors to go out throughout the world to be spies and whatever. And he's like, you can't take control of Taekwondo. I invented Taekwondo. It's my Taekwondo. And I'm not going to let you use it for political purposes. So he became persona non grata and moved to Canada and took the ITF and Taekwondo with him. At which point the South Korean government developed its own brand of Taekwondo, which later ended up in the Olympics, because exactly what General Choi had done was they developed instructors, they used their resources to dispatch instructors throughout the world, they recruited instructors, and they said to a lot of people who were with General Choi, you have to leave General Choi. And they said, I'm in America. What are you going to do to me? And they said, yes, but you have relatives here in South Korea, and we're going to make life difficult for them if you don't leave General Choi. And when General Choi was even in the U.S. in the 70s, we heard stories about, that people were going to try and kidnap him or kill him or this or that. And I had thought all of these stories were extremely exaggerated. And in fact, when he was in Arlington Heights for a competition hosted by a guy named Mac Newton was there, Grandmaster Saraf was there, Brad Euster was there. These guys were all like 6 foot, 6'2", big strapping guys. There were a bunch of Korean instructors who showed up there, and apparently with not great intentions, but they saw Mac Newton, Grandmaster Saraf, Greg Euster, they had a change of heart. But where I'm going with this is all these stories that I heard, which I thought were exaggerated at the time, there is now a book out there called A Killing Art with documented interviews, footnotes, naming names of people Alex Gillis, the author, interviewed. And based upon this book and the development of Taekwondo, the stories I heard were not exaggerated. The truth was a lot worse than all the stuff we heard. So, and if you ever want to read an interesting book about how South Korea got Taekwondo into the Olympics, there's a book called The New Lords of the Rings, which talks about, and it's not just limited to Taekwondo, it talks about how various things get into the Olympics, be it the sport, be it the host city, et cetera, based upon who you pay off and who you bribe, and cheating in with Taekwondo, the cheating and this and that. But that's really, has nothing to do with the Taekwondo that I'm associated with. As you well know, what we do with punching to the head, et cetera, is a lot different than what WT, or used to be called WTF, but now it's just WT, does. Good for us, because when people like Jacob or whatever, they go to other places and people find out they're Taekwondo students, they don't expect that. They're kind of surprised. We didn't think Taekwondo people did that.